Welcome to the Probate Realtor Show, your one source for selling and buying real estate through trust and probate. Hear directly from the best attorneys and trusted advisors on how executors and administrators navigate the probate process in and out of court. Being a personal representative or successor trustee can be a daunting task, and often beneficiaries don't have a clear plan. Let us help you make the right decision for your clients, your family, and your legacy. And now, here's your host, the probate realtor himself, Matias Baker Masucci.
Welcome, everybody, to another very exciting episode of our show. Today, we are talking to Bob Brown, who is a foundation expert. Bob, welcome to the show.
Hey, great. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. Bob wrote a book and has a very informative website. So we'll talk about all of that. The website URL, I'm just going to give it to everybody right at the beginning, foundationrepairsSecrets.com. Check it out. It's full with a lot of information. Let's delve right into the subject matter. I sell a lot of distressed assets, and people who sell trust and probate real estate are often scared by, foundation, what's going to happen with the house, the floor is this way, blah, blah. Same things for the people who buy. One of the things that clients always ask me when they're buying a distressed asset, they're like, as long as there's no foundation issues, I'm okay with it. People don't care about the way the bathrooms do. People don't care about a lot of things. But one thing that everybody cares about is foundation. So let's talk about the foundation. Well, the first thing that I wanted to ask you is, what are some common misconceptions in foundation repairs that you've encountered in your career?
The biggest one is the fact that not all distress is from settlement. Mm-hmm. You have clays that expand when they get wet, and if they're under the house, then they heave upwards, and that causes distress, and it's very difficult to tell the difference. And a lot of experts, a lot of foundation repair companies don't understand the difference, and they get it wrong. Mm-hmm. So it's more complicated and perhaps less scary once you understand it.
That makes sense. Now, let me ask you a question. One of the things that when I sell property and I'm representing the buyer, whenever we get inspection done, one of the questions that sometimes comes up in the foundation, it says you have horizontal cracks and you have horizontal cracks and vertical cracks. People are always saying, the vertical cracks, not so bad, epoxy, et cetera, but the horizontal cracks, oh no, those are no good. Can you educate me and kind of our audience on what are the difference when you notice those cracks?
Well, it depends what's cracking, okay?
Okay.
So if we're talking about the stem wall, now the stem wall foundation consists of a footing, which is, a foot, maybe 20 inches wide and 8 inches thick. And on top of that footing is what we call a stem wall. Right. Both of them should be concrete. Sometimes the stem walls are masonry, but usually concrete. Mm-hmm. And the stem wall, both the footing and stem wall have rebar in them. And the stem wall, you can see 6 inches of it before either the masonry or the wood or the stucco starts, right? And that's how that's the area where they can detect termites. That stem wall can get moisture into it, and the moisture attacks the rebar. And the rebar, when it rusts, it starts to grow. The iron oxide takes up more volume than the iron, and that puts pressure on the concrete and cracks it. So you get that horizontal crack along the stem wall. That's a fairly easy thing to fix. It basically involves chipping out the concrete, taking the rusted rebar out and putting a composite rebar in, and a few other things similar to that. That's not expensive, and it's not hard to do. Sometimes you get vertical cracks in that stem wall as well. And that's usually the J bolts, or sometimes just a little bit of stress in the footing and stem, not nearly as difficult as the horizontal crack to deal with. Now, when you're talking about the stucco or the block will usually crack in stair steps, right? And sometimes the stucco will be on an angle coming off the windows or doors, right? And sometimes you'll get horizontal and vertical cracks. I would say that vertical cracks and horizontal cracks, usually the angle cracks are the ones that are the most telling of movement. And when I'm saying movement, I'm careful to say movement, not settlement, right? Because we don't know whether it's going up or down. So I always say movement. And you'll want to understand those. Now, if you're a buyer, the mistake that most people make is they hired a home inspector, right? And the home inspector goes out within the 10-day window and he gets his report done 2 days before the window ends, right? And he says, oh, you need to contact a foundation repair expert. Then, I owned a foundation repair company and an engineering company for 35 years. They would I would get calls from brokers and realtors with 2 days left in the inspection period saying, hey, can you go out and do an investigation in 2 days? And we're like, it's like physically impossible. There's no way. So what I from the buyer's standpoint, if you're a buyer, I would contact an engineer right off the bat. Don't wait for for somebody to tell you, or else have a clause in your contract that says that if this thing is identified, you get an extra 10 days to investigate it, right? Something along those lines, because these things typically go unaddressed because there's just not time to deal with them. The other mistake that people make is that they contact a foundation repair company. Oh, you got foundation problems. Google foundation problems, right? And who comes up? Foundation repair companies. Why? Because they're really good at marketing, but they're the wrong guys. Why? Because they have a conflict of interest. They want to sell a big job. So they're going to go out and look at this house, and they're going to, the guy that's doing it gets a big commission for everything he finds. So he's going to find all kinds of things. And guess what? Your listing gets blown up, right? Yeah, you got to pay a little extra money. They'll do that for free sometimes, or for a very small amount of money. But guess what? You're gonna get what you pay for. You call a forensic engineer, and he'll come out and tell you the truth. Oh, gee, yeah, you got a few cracks. Big deal. It's not a big deal. Fix your drainage. He'll give you good advice that won't necessarily. I mean, it could be a big problem, but good chances it may not be as big a problem as you think it is.
Okay, so let's break these down, because this is important. You actually said a couple of things that are gold nuggets, and I want to make sure I point them out because, first of all, to contact in LA, a lot of properties are hillside. So when you have a hillside property that was built in 1935 or the 50s, which is very, very common, contact a foundation expert as you work through your inspections. Don't give them 1 day, 2 days. So that's very important, depending on the property, especially.
If it's a hillside, you for sure want to contact a geotech engineer, not a structural engineer. Geotech engineers are the guys that specialize in soils, right? And if you have most of these house problems are the result of soil, not from being built wrong. I mean, sometimes it's structural problems, but 99% of the time it's earth problems.
You know what? After talking to you for 5 minutes, I'm going to buy your book and read it, actually, because I'm already fascinated by what we're talking about. Now, let's talk about the other thing that you mentioned. It's like who you should call. This is important. It's like, so in LA, there are like 5 or 6 names. They're the big ones. They are foundation repair. They're like structural this, and I'm not going to make names, but structural that, and
I know who they are.
Blah blah blah. Okay. Tell me whether you should call these companies, or who are you suggesting that a buyer should call? The company that does the repair or the engineer?
I'm suggesting that you call an engineer.
Okay.
Engineers, they have oversight from the Board of Technical Registration. That keeps them in line. If they give bad advice, if they take advantage of people, if they do something corrupt or not right, they can be held accountable by the board. If the foundation repair company sends out a salesman that's accountable, in California, there is a board, but it's pretty toothless and it doesn't do anything. Right. You're pretty much SOL, because most of what they do is they make it all verbal, which is hard to prove, right? Nothing in writing, and they can't seal the report. And they don't really have the competence, honestly. I owned a foundation repair company and an engineering company, so I know the difference and I know how they operate. And foundation repair sales guys, I mean, their expertise consists of going to a 2-day seminar put on by their supplier. That's about it. An engineer has 5 years of college, 3 years of apprenticeship serving under an engineer, 2 very difficult exams, and they're held accountable. They have the education to understand these things. People think that soil is very simple, that it's just one big mass brown thing underneath. Yes. It's not. It's very, very complex. Many layers. It's like a 7-layer chip dip, It's got all these layers, and they have different mineral contents and different densities and all kinds of different things, different affinities for water, different reactions to water. It's very complicated. You want a soil engineer.
But Bob, I'm going to tell you something. I took a course a long time ago as a real estate broker, not with the intention, which was called Beneath the Surface. That was the title of the course. I can't remember who offered it. It was Carr or NAR, but anyway, the reason I'm telling you this is because at the beginning of the course, they gave a quiz of saying like, what is the most important thing in a house? And they say, they say for this, the walls, the roof, la, la, la. And at the end, the guy said, it's the soil the house stands on. There is nothing more important than that. You can have the best built house, but if you build it on, and I was like, wow, I never thought about that. It's the soil. It's absolutely right. Okay,
a friend of mine says that all roads. He's in the road building business. He says all roads are dirt roads. He says it doesn't matter whether you paint them with asphalt or you paint them with concrete. It's the soil. It's the dirt underneath the road that makes the road.
Absolutely. So true. Okay, let's get back underneath the house. One of the things that comes up sometimes when you call the inspection companies, like, oh, you got to sister the foundation, build a sister wall and things like that. Do you think that is an effective mode of repairs, or are those just like patching up when people are saying, like to sister the foundation?
It could be. I mean, it's very possible, but I wouldn't trust a foundation repair contractor if that's what they're recommending without having other advice, because you may need a sister wall or you may not need a sister wall. It just depends on each individual circumstance. It's each situation is unique and it's not simple. You want to rely on your experts. You want to have good engineers, forensic engineers that and have a relationship with, that you can call out quickly and get the real truth.
Okay, great. Let me tell you another brief story now. We talk about that. So I was selling a house for an attorney a long time ago, and she had just retrofitted the house. She did the bolting and everything that, she really it was her own home. She lived in it. So when she bought it, she did everything that she could to make it, sound, at least, with her expertise. And I remember then we put the house on the market, and on one of the door frames, the door frame on the corner, there was like a crack like that. So I'll tell you the story. An agent walks in and says, oh, look, there's a crack there. There must be foundation issues. And I'm thinking to myself, it upsets me, because it's like, first of all, you're a real estate agent. So what the hell do you know about foundation? Second, a crack that is in a door frame may have nothing to do with foundation, right? I mean, it's correct, right?
Well, everything comes in degrees. It's not black and white. You may have a little bit of movement from the soil, but it may be insignificant movement, right?
Right.
And a real estate agent is definitely not an expert. As soon as a real estate agent opens their mouth, they open themselves up for liability. I know, because I'm a licensed CEU provider for the real estate industry here. And that's the number one advice when I teach my classes to realtors is, hey, you do not opine on anything, good or bad. Now, let's talk about a strategy for a seller. If you're a listing agent or a listing broker on a property, what you want to do before you list it is you want to hire one of these forensic experts, hire a forensic engineer to give you a complete report. Might cost you $800-900, big deal. Okay, now if there's a small crack or if there's something and somebody says, oh, well, now you just hand them this report that's sealed by an engineer that says, hey, it's no big deal, right? Then you don't have to worry about it. And you don't have to worry about getting the house discounted, $500,000 or whatever, none of that, right?
Yes. So that's that. So if somebody just decide to do pre-inspection, there's different type of sales. Some sales which are as is. Obviously, we don't advise anybody, especially if they are in probate and they're an exempt seller. We obviously never advise to any, because they may have never lived in the house, never seen it. But it's true. Different circumstances. When people want to do pre-inspection, this is a good idea. Let's talk about a little bit more of the indication where you do need to call an expert,
right?
When you think so what are the things that, usually when people walk in and the floor is uneven, obviously you look at those with a different point of view. Like, when you see a house, you can walk around and you can be like, okay, I have a general idea of what the situation will be. But for us, non-experts, realtors, buyers, sellers, what are some of the red flags where we can say, okay, I got to call Bob?
Right. So the rule is in the real estate industry, the tux and tuxedo rule. If you can see the problem without having to get out of your tuxedo, or if you don't need a screwdriver or any kind of tool, right? So you can look at cracks in the walls in a tuxedo and you don't need a screwdriver to do it, right? So if you see a multitude of cracks. Now, I never get too worried about any one crack. People call me all the time and they say, hey, I have a crack. Well, big deal. I don't get too worried about a crack, especially a crack in the floor. Floors crack for a lot of reasons.
Right.
And outside stucco cracks for a lot of reasons, thermal reasons, all kinds of things, right? Floors shrink up during the concrete pour. They have thermal movement as well, especially if the house sat vacant. So what I look for is patterns. I look for patterns of, okay, there's some cracks, there's some doors pinched that don't operate, there's some windows that pinch that don't operate right. People fix doors. They don't often fix windows. And so that's kind of our little secret that we look at. Okay. But, you got cracks around the windows and they don't operate very good. Maybe it's a little low in that area. Okay, that's a pattern that you can look at and say, now, is it a really bad pattern? I don't know. You need an expert for that. They'll do a floor level survey and they'll actually rate it using a numerical scale that's provided in the engineering industry, which is something that the foundation repair companies don't know anything about. But you'll get the severity. Quite often, I'll hear a foundation repair sales guy say to a homeowner, they'll say, well, in my opinion, your house is, on a scale of 1 to 10, it's an 8.5. And I'm thinking, okay, first of all, what scale is that? It's the BS scale. And second of all, how'd you arrive at 8.5? Oh, by the fact that, all my years of experience and the fact that my kids need braces, you need to have an objective severity scale. But you can look at these various things. And if you see a pattern of cracks, if you see a pattern of low floor, a pattern of windows and doors that don't operate properly, you see a pattern of those things, then I would call in an expert. I wouldn't get too worried about a crack anywhere.
Got it. Okay, that's good. That is very good to know. Now let's talk about your journey. Let's talk about how you have arrived, to being called the dirt whisperer. I love that. So did you want to become a foundation expert when you were a child?
No, I knew nothing about that. My mother always told me as a little kid I was going to be an inventor, which is true. I hold 4 patents and I have 4 pending. But I got into the concrete repair business after graduating in architecture and in finance from ASU. And I started doing concrete repairs, which eventually led to foundation repairs, and which I sort of figured out halfway through that, it's not really good to have sales guys investigating and interpreting this. So I started an engineering company, and that's how I kind of figured that business out. Then last December, I sold everything, and it worked out well for me. It was good timing and everything. But, I'm not done. I published a book. I have patents going. I'm a speaker in many foundation and forensic conferences, and I'm trying to spread the word and help the public protect themselves and not get taken advantage of. Kind of like the money pit with Tom Hanks, right?
There you go. Now let's talk about your patents a little bit. What are these? Are these methods of repairs that you've developed over the years?
Yes.
Okay, can you share with us lay people and try to understand what this may be?
Well, I have 2 patents that are basically new construction foundation systems for houses. Okay. Elevated systems that don't get bothered by the soil. Then I have a system that dries out clays, swelling clays underneath the house. So you have clays that are swelling up. We use a system with a vacuum that pulls the air through the gravel layer underneath the concrete and dries out the clays underneath the gravel layer. That's one system. And then I've got a system called the Never Rust system that uses all composites, hold down straps and J-bolts and shoring, temporary shoring, all made of composites, including the rebar, so that when you replace those rusting elements in a stem wall, you don't have to replace them again. They'll be good for life. And quite often, they'll go very quickly, because what happens with concrete is it turns from an alkaline state to an acidic state over time. And once it goes to an acidic state, then all of the embeds, all of the steel embeds become very, very susceptible to corrosion. So if you take all the steel ones out and put new steel ones back in a very short amount of time, they'll be rusting and breaking up your concrete again. So I developed the Never Rust system. I've developed a very small pile system that drives down for slabs and fences, because there's nothing small like that on the market today. It's only very big, expensive products that are kind of like hitting a fly with a sledgehammer. And I've got some variations on each of those. I also have a patent pending on some software that I've developed to help engineers and contractors do an investigation and do it right, and a few other things similar to that.
That's great. That's very fascinating. Let me ask you a question about how things have changed over the years. A lot of the homes that we sell here in LA were built, like I said, in the 20s, in the 30s, sometimes in the 50s.
Right.
And people talk about the width of foundation. Like I don't know exactly. It changed. Now new construction, I think it has to be 16-inch or something, and now it used to be 12-inch. What have you noticed over the years that how things have changed and how people can do something with their whole homes to feel, in an earthquake-prone zone, to feel comfortable? So upgrade. I mean, is the only way to lift up the house and redo the foundation, or you think that there are, things to bring things back to the way that things are nowadays, to modern standards?
Right. Yeah, there's code upgrades that happen all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so you want to try to upgrade as much as possible. And there are companies out there that will do retrofits for earthquakes without having to tear the whole thing apart. It's a pretty simple upgrade. So it's not hard to do. Back in the early 1900s, a lot of times they would not use any rebar, which is difficult because now your ability to span is not very far. So you can upgrade that by putting like carbon fiber composites on the outside. There's a number of things you can do, and a good engineer will know all of these tricks and techniques to be able to tell them to you and give you his advice about whether he thinks you really need them or not. Right? That's the kind of things you can look at. Great.
Now you are in Phoenix. We are in LA. How can if somebody needs help? This is one of the things that this podcast is aimed at. It's like helping people find experts when they need one. And in this particular case, if somebody's in LA and reaches out to you and says, look, I'm about to purchase this home, Bob, I don't know, what can I do? Do you recommend local engineers? Do you have access to, how does it work? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so I have gotten a lot of questions about that in the last year or so since I retired and I started talking about this. Mm-hmm. And so as a result of that, I'm building on my website a directory for each area. For each state. So I've divided California up into northern and southern parts because nobody wants to travel all the way from LA to San Francisco and vice versa, right? And I'll have that completed probably in a month or so, at least the start of it. I'm going to keep building it. But if you go to my foundation site, Foundation Repair Secrets, you'll find in a month or so, you'll find a directory for your area. In the meantime, always feel free to reach out to me on either social media or my website or whatever, and I can tell you who I can recommend in your area.
That's great. That's wonderful. Before I let you go, I always like to end my shows with a back of the business card question. That's what I call it. It's kind of like getting to know the personality of somebody. I have, if you can pick a number between 1 and 30, I will ask you that question, and we'll see where it takes us.
29.
29. What fictional character do you identify yourself with the most?
Tony Stark.
Tony Stark. All right. You knew it right away. Okay, now you have to tell us why.
Because he's a smart inventor that tries to make the world a better place.
That's great. I love it. Bob, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show. One more time, can you please, we're going to have your contact information in our show notes, but can you please tell our audience, what is your email? What is the best way to get a hold of you? And tell us the URL one more time.
Sure. My website is foundationrepairsecrets.com. My email is bob@tengsol, TENGSOL.com. Feel free to reach out to me or call me or text me, 602-763-1307.
Thank you so much. I'm going to say goodbye to the audience. Stay on so we can say our own goodbye. So thank you, everybody, for joining us in this episode, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Probate Realtor Show. Find more episodes and interact with us at probaterealtor.la. That's probaterealtor.la. Listen, ask questions, and get results. Don't forget to like and subscribe. The probate realtor Matias Baker Masucci is a licensed real estate broker in California, DRE number 020547763. Any legal information provided is for informational purposes only and not for the purpose of providing legal advice. Contact an attorney to obtain advice with respect to any particular legal issue or problem. We make no guarantees as to the accuracy of any information. Thank you again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.